Alright, so now we're going to talk about Dwarf. Dwarf is obviously a very common high fantasy race. They're pretty fleshed out. Um, the unique costuming is that dwarves in Shifted Lands are not short. They don't have to be short. You can be very tall and you can be a dwarf. Uh, the unique thing is that dwarves have to have a beard. Now, if you're a natural beard grower, it can actually just be your real beard. Um, for either gender, there's there's a conversation to be had about gender. Um, but assuming female and male typically, the female gender also has to wear a beard, which is which is very funny when it comes up. Um, it's very silly sometimes, but there are it's just you have a beard. That's it. It's a very simple race to play. There's no makeup. There's no pointy ears. So if you're concerned about wearing makeup, there are some people with like skin allergies and stuff. Um, you just wear a beard and you're a dwarf. That's it. So there's a lot of times when a human can be mistaken for a dwarf because the said human has an actual beard. And so you have to like kind of be like, hey, are you a dwarf or a human? And they'd be like, I'm a human or I'm a dwarf because I have a beard. um, that has come up very often when it comes up to dwarves. There's a big history of dwarves. They're obviously a very core race to fantasy. Um, for as long as anyone can remember, the dwarves have lived in the mountains of East Aldratha. They live in the mountains. They craft stuff. It's very generic-y dwarf stuff. We'll get into the skills. So athletics, pretty good. They have a max quantity 5, which I think the other races had 3. So they get a lot of extra body. Bonus to axes. Uh, an axe versus a sword, it's not really that big of a difference. You just happen to use axes more when you're a dwarf. That's pretty common. Enhanced strength 2 is pretty common for a lot of the races that have to do with fighting stuff. Bonus hammer is neat. Hammers are very uncommon. So bonus hammer is pretty cool. Reduced craftsman. Man, is that a good skill. So that's the reduction stuff for knavery and reduced casting is pretty common. Reduced artisan stuff is not at all. Um, so this just lets you pay less in the way of production points when construction. Uh, you get to spend one less production point to a minimum of 1 point. Now, in terms of crafting, that's not really a huge thing because a lot of the major crafting, you're talking about like 35 to 50, um, and that's just like for very simple stuff. A lot of production involves a lot of production. Like you have a lot of the crafts people just put a lot of their build into production and production alone, and that's it. Like they don't really touch anything else because a lot of the really best production stuff requires you're talking like 100 plus production. So reducing by 1 isn't like super good in that sense of the scale of how you use production, but for making like little consumables, having one less production point really does add up over a long period of time. Uh, and it's not very common. You do not. This is like I think this is like almost dwarf exclusive. This is super cool. I'd be surprised to see this on any other race. Resist poison. We talked about it with beastmen. Getting it as a dwarf is super cool, and you're on a race that doesn't have to wear a ton of makeup. So if you were looking for this and you didn't want to wear a ton of makeup, resist poison is super good. Ooh, so dwarven smithing. So dwarven elders are unique because obviously dwarves are supposed to be the generic crafting race, and they get to do stuff with crafting. Like you're seeing this table here with like unchatterable and a bunch of other stuff. That's not like possible in as any other race. Like it's not part of the generic skill set. It's like a thing only dwarves can do, and it's only 5 build. Oh, that's so good. Um, but yeah, like look at this alchemy res or 500 production. Like the production stuff gets nuts when you really get into it. Um, And it's really fun. From a lot of people have said, there's a lot of crafting characters that just sit in tavern all day and they talk and they role play and they have awesome fun and they make cool weapons for people. Uh, this is super cool. They also get berserking. That's also a type of dwarf archetype. Uh, drunken crafter. Oh yeah, they're also a race that cares about intox. So under the drug and alcohol use policies of Shifted Lands, nothing is allowed on site, period. You're not allowed to be really intoxicated or under the influence of drugs while you're at Shifted Lands, obviously. So we have fake drunkenness with brews, and brews are actually shorthand for sodas. Uh, but they're fancy sodas, and you have to craft them, and the sodas are just the awesome part about it. And so a lot of my favorite memories are when you get hit with intoxications effects, and brews are pretty cool. Uh, and being able to resist, while under the effects of, while you're drunk, you can spend one additional production point per minute. So I'm not a big crafting person, but the more production you use, the longer it takes to do something, to make something. So being able to spend an additional production per minute, because I think it's like based off of like if you're an apprentice or a master that you get to spend. Yep. When you're drunk, you do production better. That's what that's what this beats, and it's 3 build, and also 1 body. That's pretty good. Grudge bearer. This is funny. Uh, Sworn enemy race. They hold grudges. They're dwarves. Uh, it has to be plot approved, so you can't just be like, I hate this guy, I'm gonna get +10 against him. It has to be plot approved. Drunken fight, drunken fighter, being immune to confusion fear. Wow, that's really good. Artificing, artifacts. If there's spellcasting and spellcasting upper tiers are like ritualing, then there's like production, and upper tier production is like making artifacts, and artifacts are real good, man. um, they're very unique, and again, artificing is something that dwarves and generically I think elves do it too. Like there's elf artifacts and there's dwarven artifacts. uh, but yeah, they're really what you expect when you think of a dwarf. The beard thing is cool, and you don't have to be short to be a dwarf. I've met 6 foot tall dwarfs, and they're usually dwarf players are so cool all the time. There's a good handful of dwarves. There's a good handful of almost all the races. Uh, Dwarves are up there in terms of commonality. There's a lot of people that play dwarves, and it's because honestly, no makeup. Running around for like over 24 hours in makeup sucks a lot of the time. So being able to just wear a beard and do your thing is super cool. That was dwarves.